Well, first I've got to fit the spring back to this release arm. This was the spring I expected to find broken and was disturbed to discover that it wasn't broken. And so the cause of my film advance problem was actually something else, yet to be discovered. Now I know it wasn't the shutter cocking rack because I've looked at that and that's in good order. Okay, so that's back on there. Some lubrication. Molybdenum paste in here, in here, in here, and along there where that spring is going to run, in this hole and that hole. You don't need much, you just need the barest wipe with molybdenum. It's a great lubricant. It's akin to graphite in its properties. Probably slipperier and quite nice to use. Okay, so that's in place. There are two springs that look much the same. The heavier springs with more coils is the one we want here. And the screw that goes through there, got quite a large head on it. It's difficult to get this screw started because the shaft is split at the top and squeezed in slightly so that it grips the screw firmly, and that's so that you can make adjustments here and the screw will stay where you left it. That's where we make the adjustment so that the film advance is released and the shutter is released at the same point in the movement of the shutter release. Otherwise, if the film advance is released first, you may find that you heard a click, thought you'd released the shutter, but actually all you'd done is release the film advance, and then you can wind on. You didn't get your shot, and you end up with a blank frame on the film, just to add insult to injury. I'm just trying to pick this little circlip up and click that into place. That was the lighter of the two screws, two springs. Okay, well, those two things are all in place. I need to look at this. This is my film advance shaft, and I'm inspecting this to see if there's any clue why things didn't move smoothly. What I'd be looking for is damage, particularly around the points of this little ratchet action here, where something's been forced back and things are no longer lying flat. There's no sharp edges sticking up that I can see, and so I'm not seeing any reason why things would stick. You can get problems if the lock that locks the film advance when you reach frame number 1, if that is sitting at an incorrect height, if it doesn't come back up correctly under its spring tension, or for some other reason, that can catch on this arm at the point where it locks this film advance. It can catch there when it's not supposed to, and that can cause you problems. It's possible that this flange on the bottom of the advance shaft here is bent or loose. It's certainly not loose. I'm not seeing any sign that it's bent. So still things are a mystery. Hopefully at the end of all this though, I'll have this back in the camera and a film advance will work smoothly with no hiccups. Well, as I sort through these components here ready to put my film advance components together. I notice I've got the strap lug here from the end of the camera I haven't bothered to put back yet. That can go in place now, I think. That would be the thing to do. It's a better place to hook my elastic band. So it's a good thing to put in place. Do that screw up. That's better. Alright, so the film advance components. Let's see what we can do about that. Here is the film advance shaft. I'm still suspicious about this. I think that the release lever was failing to move correctly on this. So nothing looked unduly stiff. That's going to be a puzzle. Alright, I better find the right grease. Right, I have some graphite grease here. This is quite tacky, it tends to stick to the shaft very well, which means that it stays between the bush and the shaft. That's good. And I'll lubricate that spring on there. That's probably over generous, it doesn't need much to do that job. Here's the take-up spool and the bush from the bottom of the take-up spool. Put that in there, drop it in the back of the camera. Fit my film advance shaft down into place. I'll just flip that lock lever up out of the way. And that's not dropping in, so I can tell that it's not fed round the spring properly. The spring is not sitting correctly on that film advance shaft. Take it out and start again. That spring should be sitting in that groove there. Okay. Be round there. That spring has shifted again. I think it just dropped in. It did. Okay. So that's in place. I've got 3 screws here to hold that in position. Get that one started. The second. And the third. I'll tighten those 3 screws up. That's good. the top of the camera, I need to install the clutch. And the clutch I need to assemble is 3 pieces. This I'm going to lubricate with graphite grease. So I'll run some graphite grease on the inside of the clutch outer. I use it for the same reasons. It's nice and tacky, stays where it's put. The springs has a small tab on the end of it that has to drop into that notch on the inner. I'm going to use some circlip pliers, some crimp lug pliers to hold that in, rotate it to pull the spring into line, put the outer over the top, pop down. That's the inner and outer assembled together. That revolves smoothly in one direction, and that's the direction it needs to revolve, so all is good. Bit of synthetic grease through the centre, bring back the camera, rotate this until it engages with the notch in the top of the take-up spool. This is the bush for the top of the film advance. These pinions are somewhat dry, so I'm squeezing in some grease there. I wipe through the centre. That's all synthetic grease. Put that in position, roll the take-up spool with my thumb, which will engage the gear on the outside of the clutch with this wheel. And that's pulled into line. There's a shoulder screw that goes on this side. The top of that shoulder screw supports the shutter cocking rack to stop it from moving away from the gear on the top of the film advance. There's a spacer there that needs to go on. Plain side up, countersunk side down. If you mix it up, the little pinion here, this little pawl will not work. This little pawl stops the film take-up spool from revolving backwards. It stops the mechanism at the top here from revolving backwards. Get that lined up. Usually I get that screw down first. When it's tight, that little pawl should be free to move. It is. There's a return spring for that pawl that fits around a groove on the top of that screw. I'll fit that into position. You can hear a droning sound in the background. My neighbour's got some truck parked up against the fence here, which is busy idling away. Right, I'll just put that underneath the base of the camera to support the film advance shaft so that it doesn't just push away while I'm getting everything assembled here. So, a little bit of grease under here. Rotate that anti-clockwise, it should push the pawl out of the way, and if I rotate that to point front to back, that should be a good spot. This leaf spring goes on. The outside edges should be up. this piece goes on. This piece goes on. That washer goes on. Then we have the gear from the top of the film advance shaft. I'm just having a look at that against the light. I'm not seeing any obvious problems. We'll put that straight on. I'll run this screw down. And tighten it up. It's the film advance shaft in. At the bottom of the camera, I want the latch for the rewind button. And normally I lubricate the tip of that with a wipe of molybdenum paste. And since I've got that in my hand, I normally swing it through there to the pivot point. It slides underneath. Oh, that noise has gone away. It wasn't the neighbour's truck. Okay. Put the spring in place. I haven't hooked that into position, I've just put it loosely in place, and the screw that goes in here is a shoulder screw, two shoulders, one that the spring can revolve around, one that the lever can revolve around. So as you do it up, make sure that it passes through the lever and that the lever is not just trapped underneath it, and at the moment that's not happening. That's better. Do the screw up tight, make sure the lever moves, it does. Now I've got to hook that spring around this side, so I've got to delve in here, pick it up with the end of my tweezers. And swing it over that arm. That's better. So this is now sprung loaded. And the next thing I want to do is put my sprocket shaft in. So here's the film sprocket, slot side up. This goes into the back of the camera here. Put some synthetic grease on the shaft towards the top and towards the bottom where it's going to run through the casting. Normally I give a wipe to that little pinion on the top too. Slide that down. It should pass right through the take up through this sprocket. Just poke my tweezers up from underneath to align it. Revolve the take-up spool with my thumb to engage this gear. And then revolve my take-up spool to bring the hole in the sprocket shaft in line with the slot of the sprocket and fit the screw that connects the sprocket shaft and the sprocket together. Oh, that was handy. And fish it back out of that hole. Oops, that was just it hitting the floor. Back in a second. That hadn't gone very far. This screw is sometimes difficult to get started. Sometimes it can be helpful to revolve the whole shaft 180 degrees because there may be a better lead in on the other side. This will not start. Now it will, it's away. Do that up snug. The rewind button. Want the button, its return spring and the washer. Put some synthetic grease through the washer, through the spring rather. Put the button through. Put the washer in place. And this screws to the bottom of the sprocket shaft. So if I support it with my finger from the top, I can screw this in place from the bottom. And you need the shaft on the button to pass through the washer. You don't want the washer to get caught on the shoulder of that screw. That's all good. I hold my thumb on the sprocket, use my pliers to tighten that screw. That's in place, that's all good. Now I can tension up my film advance, put the base plate in place and the film advance lever in place. To find the right screws, I've got 3 nickel plated screws. To tension the film advance, first I'll press up on the lock lever and push it to one side. Let's open this door so the camera will support itself a bit better. Right. So I need to rotate this one full turn clockwise. And drop that and the lock lever back in position. So now I've got my film advance shaft tensioned one full turn. I've got to be careful now not to press the release lever or the lock lever at the top of the camera, because otherwise this will unwind and I'll have to take this off to tension it up again. So I'll get the 3 screws here in the base plate. Find my film advance lever and it's 3 screws. And put that in place. I'm going to have this off again yet to do the leatherette, and I'll clean the film advance lever at that point. But at the moment I want to get this on here, because that will prevent the film advance from being able to unspool and lose its tension. Okay, so that's in place. So I press the release lever, swing the advance. Now there's that locking action. Now we might be able to find out what's doing it. It's not the lock lever. It's not the release lever. I think it's here. I think this is hanging up. I think there's some damage to one of those edges. Yes. So it's locked at the moment. If I touch this, it'll release. The catch is here. This is not right. Okay, so one of these edges is damaged, and instead of rolling neatly over the top of the other one, it's sticking. Well, that's good to know. At least I've narrowed down my problem now. I know exactly where it lies. I'll remove these components from the top and have a look at these two pieces. See if I can decide which of these two pieces is damaged, how it's damaged, whether the damage can be repaired, or whether I'll have to replace something. And of course I want to replace the right component. Have the gear off, the washer off. Now it's possible something is bent. Looking at that spring, there's nothing remarkable about that spring. So I've got to look at this. And what I'm looking for is some damage to the edge, something that would catch the other component. It feels a bit sharp along that edge and a bit rough. Okay, there's certainly something there on that edge. The other side's good. These pieces have a little lead up on one edge, a little bevel. I'm looking at this piece in particular to see if it looks bent, because it does look bent on one side. I'm trying to think how that happened, how that would become damaged. The clutch should prevent this from coming in under any undue stress if the end of the film has been reached. I'll have to inspect these two pieces very closely and see if I can determine which one of them is causing the problem, or what combination of the minor faults they may have is causing the problem. It may well be that something is just not flat. Something that should be flat is not flat. I'll sort that out. Well, that took some tracking down. It was this piece. There was some slight roughness on it. And that roughness prevented this plate from moving smoothly on it. Well, that wasn't the plate that came off here. I've got the original plate on the camera here. It was only this piece that I needed to replace. But now, the film advance is absolutely smooth. No hesitation in returning. So that was an unusual problem. and I can see that there's a lip on that plate there. It's just wear most likely. Yeah, it's just got a sharp edge on it. I think if I took a file to it I could probably make that thing work again. But I'm not about to take a file to it. I've got an answer there now that's good to go. And sometimes that shows you it's very useful to have a supply of parts about that you can, so you can test by substitution, because sometimes that's the easiest way. Sometimes you can look and you can't see anything wrong, but by testing by substitution you can narrow down which component it is that's causing the problem. And once you know which component it is, you're more focused on what fault with that particular component could cause that issue. And now I know. So that's good. The film advance is good. We've got that little problem out of the way. And I'm ready to put the shuttercocking rack on this. But it's the end of the day, it's beer o'clock, and I can't be doing that now.